Welcome to the woman who wrote her own obituary, a Miss Temperance Holt mystery. When novelist Evelyn Marsh is found dead at her writing desk, there seems little reason for suspicion, until the local newspaper discovers something extraordinary. 6 weeks earlier, Evelyn had written her own obituary, complete with the exact date of her death, and Miss Temperance Holt intends to discover how she knew. Chapter 1. The Joke That Ran. The Chalfont Gazette had never printed anything by accident in 32 years, and Roger Pym intended to keep it that way. So when he found Evelyn Marsh's obituary sitting in the Tuesday folder, dated for a Tuesday that had not yet happened, his first thought was not fear, it was irritation. He remembered the letter that came with it 6 weeks earlier. Evelyn's handwriting, small and slanted, the kind that looked apologetic even when it was not. She had written that she wanted to see her own send-off done properly, since she doubted anyone else would get the tone right. She called it a private joke between herself and the paper. She asked him to file it and forget it. He had filed it. He had not forgotten it, not quite, but he had certainly not expected to need it. Now it was Tuesday, and Evelyn Marsh was dead, and the date on the obituary matched the date on the death certificate exactly. Roger did not run the story himself. He telephoned the police first, then he telephoned a woman he had met only once, at a literary luncheon 3 years before, whose card he had kept in his top drawer for reasons he could not entirely explain. Miss Temperance Holt answered on the second ring, as though she had been waiting for the call, which, as it turned out, she very nearly had. "Roger Pym," she said, "you sound like a man who has found something he wishes he had not filed." "She wrote her own obituary," Roger said, 6 weeks ago, and she got the date right. There was a pause on the line, the sort of pause that meant thinking rather than surprise. "Read it to me," said Miss Holt. "Every word." He read it to her. It was short, barely 200 words, and it was very good, better than anything Roger himself would have managed. It described Evelyn Marsh as a novelist of modest fame and immodest opinions, survived by a daughter and estranged from a husband, predeceased by any illusions about the publishing trade. It named no cause of death. It closed with a line that Roger had read 4 times before he telephoned anyone at all. She always said she would have the last word. She was right, as usual. "That is not a joke," said Miss Holt. "That is a message. Someone was meant to read it after she was gone, and I do not think she meant it to be funny at all." Miss Temperance Holt arrived in Chalfont by the 10:40 train, carrying one small case and an umbrella she did not need, since it had not rained in Chalfont for 9 days and would not rain for 4 more. She was 61 years old, unmarried, and known in 3 counties for solving the kind of crime that other people had already decided was an accident. She had a way of listening that made witnesses say more than they intended, and a way of sitting still that made guilty people nervous simply by proximity. She went first to the house on Larch Row, a narrow brick cottage with ivy trained too carefully to be wild, and a study window that faced the garden. It was in that study that Evelyn Marsh had been found, seated at her desk, an unfinished page in the typewriter and a cup of cold tea at her elbow. The local doctor had called it heart failure. Miss Holt intended to find out whether the heart had failed on its own. She was met at the gate by a young constable who clearly did not know what to do with a woman who introduced herself as a private detective and expected to be let past a police cordon on the strength of it. "I telephoned Inspector Bray this morning," she said, before he could object. "He is expecting me." If he is not, you may telephone him yourself and interrupt his breakfast, and I shall wait very patiently while you do." The constable let her past. Inside, the house smelled of old paper and lavender polish, the particular smell of a house kept by someone careful. In the study, 4 people stood about with the awkward stillness of people who have been asked to wait and do not know for how long. Miss Holt took them in with a single unhurried glance, the way another person might read the first line of a book to judge whether the rest was worth the time. There was Julian Marsh, the husband, though not the widower, since the marriage had ended in all but paper 3 years before. He had the look of a man who had once been handsome and had spent the years since deciding whether to be angry about losing it. There was Priya Ashworth, editor at Hallow and Vane, sharp, suited even in a house of mourning, her eyes moving over the bookshelves as though cataloguing them. There was Desmond Voss, a journalist not yet 30, notebook already out, trying and failing to look as though he were not working. And there was Frances Marsh, the daughter, pale and dry-eyed in the particular way of someone who has been crying alone and does not intend to do it in front of an audience. Behind them, in the doorway to the kitchen, stood Mrs. Coombs, the housekeeper, arms folded, watching everyone with the calm of a woman who had seen a great many things in 20 years of service and had stopped being surprised by most of them. "Good morning," said Miss Holt to the room in general. "I understand one of you found her." "I did," said Frances quietly. "Yesterday morning. She was always at her desk by 8. When she wasn't down by 9, I came up." "And the obituary," said Miss Holt. "Which of you knew about it before this morning?" Silence answered her first, which was, in its way, an answer. "I did," said Priya Ashworth finally. "Evelyn told me about it herself, at lunch, weeks ago. She thought it was funny. I did not particularly." "I knew," said Desmond Voss. "Roger showed me the letter in confidence because I cover the arts page and he thought I'd enjoy the joke." Julian Marsh said nothing. Frances Marsh said nothing. Mrs. Coombs, from the doorway, said, "I typed it for her." Every head in the room turned. "She dictated it," said Mrs. Coombs, unbothered by the attention. "One afternoon in June, said she wanted it typed proper, not handwritten, so the paper would take it seriously. I didn't think anything of it. She was always writing something odd." Miss Holt looked at the housekeeper for a long moment, the way she looked at a sentence she suspected of hiding a second meaning beneath the first. "Then you, Mrs. Coombs," she said, "knew the exact words before anyone else in this house, including, I imagine, the words that have not yet been read aloud." Mrs. Coombs did not flinch. "I typed what she told me to type. I never asked why." "No," said Miss Holt softly. "I do not suppose you did."